Hello. We're happy to have you here with us today. We have some information we think is going to help you. We've had a lot of discussion this year about low-performing schools and priority schools, and we'd like to kind of walk through what those mean for the schools, for the students, and for the staffs. I'm Theo Helm. I'm Chief of Staff. We have here Dr. Beverly Emory, our Superintendent, and Dr. Kenneth Simington, our Chief Academic Officer. And so we're just going to go through some questions and answers that have kind of been very common in a lot of these discussions, and we hope that you find this helpful. So Dr. Emory, I'll start with you. This year we've had schools named both low-performing schools and priority schools. Can you give us a little better picture of what the differences those are, what the definitions of each are?
Yes, it's been a difficult year for that. We've had both of those designations in October. The State Board of Education accepted basically the legislature's definition for low-performing schools, which is a school with a performance grade of a D or an F that either did not make growth or met growth. So a school would have had to have exceeded growth with a lower performance grade, which was the low-performing schools, and we have 29 of those. And then about a month later, the federally driven definition, which asks states to identify schools in the bottom 5% performance-wise, and that's just a proficiency number. It doesn't look at whether a school has made or not made or exceeded growth. And that's where we had our 11 priority schools identified.
So, Dr. Simington, what do these designations mean for the schools and their staff and their students? Are there different steps for low-performing schools versus priority schools?
There are some similarities, but there are some distinctions. For the low-performing schools, once we received notification that the 29 schools were identified as low-performing, we had some timelines and some things that we had to do, including each of those 29 schools had to submit a plan which outlined what would happen in the school, also outlined what the district would do to support those schools in improving their performance composite and their growth status. And then we submitted those plans to our school board, and those were submitted to the state, and those were considered preliminary plans. And after the holidays, we received those plans back, and we received feedback from the Department of Public Instruction. And just a few weeks ago, we submitted our final plans. And so each of those 29 schools have had their what we call low-performing school plans posted on the district website as well as on their school website. For the priority school plans, several of those schools were also low-performing schools, so they submitted those plans, and there are additional steps that are required with priority school status.
And one of those steps is choosing a model, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the different models are?
So from the federal designation, a district has an opportunity to select one of those models. And so the four models, one model is closure, and that means that the local education agency could decide to close a school. Our district has not decided to close any of the schools.
And we don't have any plans to do that, do we?
We do not have any plans to close any schools. A second model is called Restart. And Restart is a fairly significant overhaul of the school, which includes changing out the entire school staff, including the administration. It's fair to say, though, that teachers who are assigned to the current school, if that's a Restart school, will have the opportunity to reapply.
Okay. Do we have any of those this year that we're looking at?
Cook Elementary has been announced as a Restart school, and so we've been engaged with the Cook staff and the Cook community and parents related to that. A third model is called Turnaround. And a turnaround model includes changing the school leadership or the principal and up to 50% of the staff. And then finally, there is school transformation. And the transformation model really looks at personnel in terms of the teaching staff. I would say, in addition to the personnel factors that I mentioned for each of the models, there's always a review of the instructional design of the school, as well as reviewing the data and considering some other pieces. And then finally, it's not a model per se, but there are what I call seven turnaround principles, PLE principles. So we have people principles and we have concepts principles. In this instance, the 7 turnaround principles, we are looking at those currently before we get to a model for each of the 11 priority schools. To add a little more detail to the 7 turnaround principles, the first one is related to reviewing the performance of the current school administrator or principal. That's the person. The second relates to the effectiveness of the teaching staff. How well are they doing? And thirdly, looking at how is the school day designed? Looking at the day, the week, or the year. Should we extend a day? Should we extend a year? Those sorts of things. Also looking at what are we doing instructionally? Do we need to revise our instructional program? Do we need to reconsider our instructional resources? It also looks at, and this is the 5th principle, looking at data to inform our instruction. Are we really making data-driven decisions, which is a really important piece. The 6th principle is ensuring that there is a safe school environment. We know that students and staff want to be sure that they are safe when they're in school, and certainly there are student outcomes that are impacted by their ability or their feeling of being safe. And then finally, how do we engage the family and the community? We know that it's important, the work that happens with the schools and the administrators, but certainly engaging the family and the community are important concepts. So those are the 7 principles.
You mentioned, Dr. Simington, that Cook has been announced as a restart school, that it'll be using that model there. Are there going to be other restart models used?
Not for the fall of 2016-17. Cook will be our only restart model for that school year.
And so how and when will you decide the other models for the other priority schools?
We've been working with each of our schools, and because most of the priority schools are also low performing, they've been on an expedited evaluation process, and we didn't want to just pick a model that didn't align with what was going on in that school. So the timeline we've given buildings is April 8th to clarify for all of the staff there which model will apply to their schools for the 2016-17 school year. In the interim, we're using the principles, PLEs, that Dr. Simington mentioned as a way to help us construct the plans and apply for the budgets that the priority schools can receive.
You mentioned the expedited evaluations. Dr. Simington, can you tell us a little bit about which model requires that and why?
So the expedited evaluations were a part of the low performing schools statute. So once we knew who those schools were, then in accordance with the statute, from the assistant superintendents to principals, we were required to do sort of earlier evaluations to come to decisions about current status of all staff.
Right. And so that, as you said, that was required by the statute. And so teachers have already been going through that process up to this point this year.
Correct.
So in other words, teachers, that wouldn't surprise them. They'd already know they were being a part of it.
Right, and it shouldn't surprise them as well. 9 of the 11 priority schools are low-performing schools, so they would have been a part of that process.
Right. So there's a lot of crossover, and that can lead to some confusion about which part goes with which priority or low-performing school.
Yeah, you could easily confuse one of the designations, low-performing schools or priority schools, and wonder why I'm having to do this particular process. A school could be in both categories, low performing and priority. It could be in one or the other. And it really does require all of us to be pretty particular with the words that we use to describe what we're talking about.
Right. One of the things that keeps coming up is the emphasis on staffing and personnel. Dr. Emory, why would you say there's so much focus on the principal and the teaching staff in these models?
Both models have a lot of emphasis on the principal, which I know has created a lot of anxiety out there. On the teaching staff for low-performing schools, it's the expedited evaluation process that Dr. Simington mentioned. But then in those models for priority schools, depending on which model, really does have impact on staff. And I think that crossover, particularly with leadership, really supports what the research says about any change effort, particularly with turnaround, particularly with our most challenging schools. I'm sure that the folks in the legislature who are making these decisions are looking at the same research we are, which says that strong, effective leadership really can be pivotal in that. And so we have great leaders in our schools, and we also have leaders that need additional support from us, and so that's one of the areas that I think we're trying to focus on, but I'm sure that's why we see that theme run through both of these efforts.
Right. And I think one of the thing that we keep coming back to is, what are we doing to help schools? Because in the end, what are we doing to help the students? At the end of all of this work, that's our goal, obviously. So can you all walk us through a little some of the things we are trying to do as a district and as schools to help these students?
So I'll start across our instructional services group. There are certain strategies that we already have in place. We created what we call school support teams. And those school support teams are there to be of assistance to the school administration as well as the school staff. We are in the second year of a strategy that we call professional learning teams. So we're really honing in on those teams and make sure they're being used efficiently and effectively to get the kind of outcomes. Back to the research, we know that PLTs, as we call them, are a proven strategy. In terms of providing school support, we're using lots of resources to do that. We're also engaged in a process sometimes called walkthrough that we call learning walks. And these are opportunities for these school support teams to be in the buildings to look at strategies. And those strategies that are being observed are strategies that are coming typically out of the school improvement plan or the low performance school plan that the schools have identified as indicators for their improvement, and those are the places where the school support teams are focusing on.
Now, I'd just like to add that I think while these have been layers this year that have been new and created a lot of anxiety, we've really tried to continue to line up to district goals and priorities and believe that those strategies that have been mentioned, along with the other things we're trying to do, will get us there. And maybe in some of our schools we need to accelerate that or accelerate the support. But all the things that have come out of instruction, I believe, are focused on adults and investing in adults with the new launch of the Teacher Academy and Leader Academies, with focus on more direct support in certain areas across this district for adults. I think all of our technology efforts, we just deployed 17,000 Chromebooks to really help support more individualized opportunities for students. We're taking back control of our summer school and trying to recruit our own folks to help us with those extra extended learning time pieces. So my hope is that we stay focused on the literacy goal, the graduation goal, the GAP goal, and the strategies that we know will get us there. And then, I think it is important for us to acknowledge that we have schools that have greater challenges. We support them very much with Title I funds, but we've also tried to help the entire district do a better job of looking at our data. What does our data say? What does research say about what we ought to be doing with that data? Because we have limited resources and limited time, and I know they all want to be doing the right thing. So how do we help focus that as much as possible?
Well, thank you, Dr. Emory, and thank you, Dr. Simington, for all of the information you've shared with us, and we hope you found this helpful. If you have other questions, please feel free to email them to wsfcs.k12.nc.us. We'll be happy to take those questions, turn them over to Dr. Emory and Dr. Simington, answer them, and get answers back to you and out on our website where everyone can see them. Thank you very much.